This video presents a 30-year history of the Advisory Board, which represents the member communities of the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority. The specific focus is how the Advisory Board's actions helped shape the world-class water and wastewater systems we know today. Here's the speed reader's version of the creation of the MWRA. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts provided water and wastewater services to the greater Boston area through an agency called the Metropolitan District Commission, or MDC. The MDC and the state allowed the water and wastewater systems to essentially collapse due to chronic underinvestment and were sued under the Massachusetts Clean Water Act. And Judge Garrity, later dubbed the Sludge Judge by the papers, handled the case. Additionally, the state was sued under the Federal Clean Water Act, and Judge Mazzone was assigned this case, no clever nickname given. The result of these suits was that the Acts of 1984 demolished the MDC and created a new agency, the MWRA, to take over the water and wastewater systems. Due to questions about how much it would cost for the new MWRA to comply with the state and federal Clean Water Acts, the Massachusetts legislature also created an advisory board to represent the interests of the cities and towns within the system and the ratepayers that would be footing the bill. The two biggest cost drivers of the suits were the construction of the Deer Island Treatment Plant, which was to become the flagship wastewater facility of the authority, and also the long-term CSO control plan, which would separate sewer pipes from stormwater pipes to combat overflows that happened during significant rain events when the system became overwhelmed. While we all now enjoy the benefits of the work done to complete the Deer Island Treatment Plant and put an end to CSOs, this video will review the past 30 years from the Advisory Board perspective, recounting some of the trials and tribulations along the way. From the beginning, crafting policy was one of the essential responsibilities of the Advisory Board, and in 1987, rate assessment policies were addressed to solve conflicts with federal and state regulations. The Advisory Board developed a policy to encourage water conservation, and the outcome was reaching the safe yield of the Quabbin and Wachusett reservoirs in 1989. In fact, water demand today is in the 200 million gallons per day range, significantly below the 300 MGD line in red, which was previously the norm. Also policy-related, the Clinton Wastewater Treatment Plant was gifted to the MWRA in 1987 by the Commonwealth in an effort to cut state costs. The Advisory Board fought against the state, filing a lawsuit against the town of Clinton and protesting Governor Wells' decision. More on this to come. Essentially, the early days can be viewed through two lenses. Through the first, one sees that the MWRA broke ground on vital projects to fix an ailing system, projects that were extremely successful and set up the MWRA's infrastructure for decades to come. Through the second lens, the view is of ratepayer pain, as rates increased exponentially due to the cost of court-mandated projects. Pictured here is an Advisory Board meeting, drawing attendance from community representatives and irate ratepayers calling for an end to the hardship. For example, in 1990, the Advisory Board forced the MWRA to reduce their proposed rate increase from a whopping 46% to a slightly less whopping 20%. From an environmental perspective, the dividends began to pay off as 1991 marked the end of the sludge discharges into Boston Harbor with the opening of the sludge-to-fertilizer pelletizing plant at Fore River in Quincy. Today, the fertilizer produced by the MWRA is considered top quality by Mass DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection. Another positive note was the adoption of the Cohen Bill, which put an impetus on watershed protection and is a large part of why the MWRA has the now pristine Quabbin and Wachusett reservoirs. Pictured here is Governor Weld signing the bill at the Wachusett Reservoir. On a less positive note was Governor Weld's proposed water tax, which would have taxed the MWRA for withdrawals from the Quabbin Reservoir. An obvious money grab by the state, the Advisory Board spearheaded legal action against the proposal and won the landmark decision. The mid-1990s held many big-ticket items from the Advisory Board perspective. In 1994, the long-term CSO control plan was revised as the Advisory Board argued that one size doesn't fit all, and this revision to the plan saved hundreds of millions of dollars. Pictured here is Advisory Board Executive Director Joseph Favaloro arguing for a dramatic revision to the CSO plan, taking a basin-by-basin approach. To offset the financial impacts of the CSO plan and other court-mandated projects, the Advisory Board put forth an initiative for the legislature to enact the Commonwealth Sewer Rate Relief Fund, or Debt Service Assistance. Pictured here is Mayor McCarthy of Everett testifying, with Mayor Sheets of Quincy on deck. Obviously, communities were excited about the prospect of any financial assistance to provide relief to their constituents, and debt service assistance kicked off with an initial payment of $27 million. Over $400 million in debt service assistance has been paid to the MWRA as a result, offsetting rates for communities. In light of this financial assistance, the Advisory Board demanded that there be no rate increase in fiscal year 1995 due to the previous hardships already endured by ratepayers. Though these constant battles over rate increases got the Advisory Board dubbed the fiscal watchdog of the MWRA by the Boston Globe, unfortunately the 0% rate increase was only sustainable for 1 year, more on rates later. Perhaps the biggest policy discussion the Advisory Board ever undertook and solved was the sewer rate methodology. Essentially, the goal was creating a fair system for all communities, big or small. This cartoon by Peter Wallace in the Boston Globe depicts smaller communities arguing that larger communities were receiving an unfair break. The Advisory Board created a working group and developed a comprehensive methodology for calculating sewer rates that was fair for communities big and small, and after sewer rate hearings, pictured here with Representative Paul Haley testifying, the new methodology was adopted for fiscal year 1995 and has been in place ever since. Another positive impact at this time came from the Advisory Board's watchdog role in the development of the plans for the new Deer Island treatment plant. The Advisory Board argued that the scale and scope of the project was too great and could be scaled back. The decision to follow the Advisory Board's proposal saved ratepayers $125 million in design and construction costs, even before considering the cost of borrowing. This was a truly impactful decision that demonstrated the necessary role of the Advisory Board in the financial decisions of the MWRA. The late 1990s was a period of transition. The argument over the Clinton plant came to a welcome conclusion in 1996, almost 10 years after the Commonwealth forced control of the plant onto the MWRA, along with the costs. In that time, a plan for the creation of the Clinton-Lancaster Wastewater District, which would have removed control of the facility from the MWRA, had been vetoed by Governor Weld. This was followed by protests by the Advisory Board in front of the State House. Finally, in 1996, a $4 million settlement was given to the authority to cover some costs, and the MWRA remained in control of the facility, receiving annual payments to mitigate the cost of operating the plant. In 1999, the Advisory Board again had to take a big swing at MWRA's spending, cutting $10.8 million from the budget and $92 million from the capital plan. This back and forth between the Advisory Board and the MWRA led to 2 Advisory Board recommendations in the following few years. First, a personnel study to determine the optimal level of staffing for the authority, and second, a 5-year CIP spending cap designed to curb capital spending and slow down the pace of the MWRA's borrowing. Both of these recommendations were successful and continue to impact MWRA operations today. The time of transition applies to both water and wastewater utilities, with water projects beginning and sewer projects coming to an end. On the water side, construction of the Metro West Tunnel began, which would deliver redundant service from the eventual John J. Carroll Water Treatment Plant in Marlboro to the covered storage tanks being developed in the Metro West area. On the sewer side, the Nut Island Treatment Plant in Quincy closed, and the 9.5-mile outfall tunnel was put into service as the MWRA finally came into compliance with the Clean Water Act. Essentially, with primary and secondary treatment at Deer Island and the pelletizing plant turning the organic matter into fertilizer, the outfall pipe was put into place to deliver the remaining effluent away from Deer Island. The effluent, after treatment, causes no harm to the ocean, allowing Boston Harbor over the past 15 or so years to begin to naturally bounce back from previous discharging. The result, as we'll soon discuss, has been exceptional. With the most significant changes to the wastewater system being put in place, the early 2000s represented the age of MWRA water system improvements. The Metro West Tunnel came online in 2003, shown here is the end of the tunnel and the workers who completed it. Next, Norumbega Covered Storage was finished in Weston in 2004, part of an organization-wide effort to move away from open reservoir storage of drinking water. Most significantly, the flagship water facility for the authority went online in 2005 as the John J. Carroll Water Treatment Plant began treating all drinking water distributed east of Marlboro through the process of ultraviolet or UV treatment. These improvements to the water system also allowed for system expansion, with Stoughton, Reading, and Dedham Westwood all joining during this period. Bedford had just recently joined, and Wilmington was the last community to join in 2009. The Advisory Board continues to push for water system expansion as a means to drive down water rate assessments, having recommended various tools to make it easier for communities to join. Most recently adopted was the Advisory Board's plan to allow communities up to 25 years to pay their allocated capital costs of entering the system. Also at this time, the Advisory Board pushed for the development of a 5-year CIP spending cap, and the first cap went into place for FY04 through 08, set at $1.13 billion. Why did the Advisory Board feel a cap on capital spending was necessary? Well, for one, 2004 represented the first year that capital financing costs, or debt service, were greater than half of the MWRA's total spending. Looking more closely, this graph shows the correlation of capital spending to debt service paid. There's an obvious delay from capital spending, the dotted line, to eventual debt service payments, the bars on the graph. By putting a cap on capital spending, the Advisory Board looked to mitigate future rate increases while also asking the authority to be more deliberate in their planning. which relates to the Advisory Board's further recommendation that the MWRA develop a master plan in conjunction with the CIP cap. The master plan was released in 2006 and later updated in 2013. The Advisory Board's goal was to increase transparency as to the future needs of the system and the short and long-term goals of the MWRA. Also in 2006, an agreement was reached with EPA on the CSO control plan that put a 15-year variance into place, slowing down CSO work to allow time for analysis of the results from the work that had already been done. Another major win for ratepayers was the restructuring of the MWRA's debt in 2007 as recommended by the Advisory Board. A refunding of $648 million allowed for debt service payments to be smoothed out between 2008 and 2020, slowing the increase in capital financing costs that drive rates. The line in red is the result of the restructuring of debt. The Advisory Board also recommended that with the restructuring, the MWRA revisit the reserve levels previously agreed to with bond rating agencies, since by 2007 the MWRA had established a track record as a financially responsible public entity. More on this to come. The first CIP spending cap ended after FY08 with $888.5 million spent of the $1.13 billion cap. Considered a success, the Advisory Board worked to set a second 5-year cap from FY09 to 13 for a similar amount. Again, a success. Based on spending of the first two caps, a third cap from FY14 through 18 was set below $800 million. Altogether, the 5-year cap concept recommended by the Advisory Board has successfully increased transparency in the MWRA's capital spending. But as usual, this period wasn't all good news. A significant shaft break in 2010 interrupted service of clean drinking water to the greater Boston area for a few days. When service was restored, the already planned water redundancy initiative took on greater importance, as all single point of failure pipes in the system became top priority, as evidenced in the 2013 update to the Water Systems Master Plan. These initiatives will be the focal point of the water system for the next decade or so. So what's been happening in the past few years? Well, as always, increasing rates are the topic du jour, and following FY 2011, the Advisory Board and the MWRA came to an agreement that a goal of sustainable and predictable rate assessment increases was best not only for the MWRA, but also for member communities and their ratepayers. This graph shows the rate revenue requirements from FY06 to 15. The first 5 years are rate increases in the mid to high 4s. In FY11, the Advisory Board demanded a lower increase, eventually settling for a 1.5% increase. What followed, with an agreement for sustainable and predictable rates, has been rate increases in the mid-3s. The reasoning for sustainable and predictable increases is derived from the scheduled debt service that the MWRA will have to repay between now and FY22, when it is scheduled to finally peak. Avoiding drastic changes in rates from one year to the next allows communities to better prepare their water and sewer budgets. Another crucial topic for communities in the past few years is the Inflow and Infiltration, or II program. The program was extremely successful through 8 phases in providing communities with grants and loans that help cut down on how much rain and groundwater get into local sewer pipes and increase the flow that communities pay for. The Advisory Board's Operations Committee recommended that the program be expanded in phases 9 and 10 due to the success of the program. The result is that the program doubled from $40 to $80 million per phase. The payback period was doubled from 5 years to 10 years, and the grant and loan split was changed in favor of communities. This will allow cities and towns to get significantly more II work done, helping their ratepayers and the environment. In 2015, 2 communities, Newton and Waltham, took all their Phase 9 money as soon as it was available, showing the demand that exists for the program. Not only have we reached the 30th anniversary of the Advisory Board and the MWRA, but there have also been significant milestones reached of late. In 2015, after the Advisory Board had worked tirelessly with our friends in the legislature and other stakeholders for a landmark infrastructure bill, Senate 2021 was passed. The bill provides a variety of possible funding sources for water and wastewater infrastructure, while again offering a helping hand to communities interested in joining the water system. For all their help in getting this bill passed, the Advisory Board presented Senate President Terry Murray with the Legislator of the Year award in 2014, as the Senate President was very influential in getting water and wastewater infrastructure needs back on the agenda in the State House. For their help in getting the bill passed, the Advisory Board presented Senator Jamie Eldridge and Representative Carolyn Dykema with the Legislators of the Year award in 2015. Maximizing the infrastructure bill now becomes the goal of the Advisory Board and all other interested parties. Also in 2015, the MWRA reached full funding of their pension plan, in large part due to the Advisory Board recommendation that the pension liability be addressed fully before beginning to fund other post-employment benefits, or OPEB. Full funding of the pension system, among other milestones, triggered the Long-Term Rates Management Committee, originally recommended by the Advisory Board, to reconvene for the purpose of addressing the release of reserves mentioned before with the 2007 restructuring of debt. A total of $113.4 million was raised over the years to ensure that MWRA could maintain a high bond rating, and the Rates Committee was tasked with deciding where those reserves should be applied. With the pension fund fully funded, the committee agreed to use $10 million to begin addressing OPEB, which was considered the less important liability than pension, with the remaining $103.4 million going directly to offsetting rate assessments from FY17 to 20, a significant step in maintaining sustainable and predictable rate assessments for communities. Finally, December 2015 marks the end for CSO work under the control plan. This, of course, is unrelated to the cost to ratepayers who will be paying the debt service on CSO projects for years to come, but still, this marks a major milestone in the 30-year history of the Advisory Board and the MWRA. The future for these court-mandated projects holds the next due date of December 2020, when the final CSO report will be due. The Advisory Board will continue to look at managing rate assessments, though this is mostly related to debt management. The Advisory Board has issued a 4 no more edict, meaning no more rate assessment increases over 4% ever again, but 4% isn't a target, it's a ceiling, and the Advisory Board continues to try to drive down rates as much as possible. Also, just because the major projects have been completed, that doesn't mean future capital needs don't exist. To avoid the MWRA deteriorating the way its predecessor, the MDC, did, the authority will have to continue to invest in asset protection and water redundancy. These are the two main goals going forward. In addition to rates, the Advisory Board will strive to protect the MWRA and member communities from overly stringent state and federal regulations, such as the molybdenum limits set by Mass DEP. The Mass DEP limit on the bottom is excessively stringent in relation to the EPA's limit and other states that have chosen to set their limit below the EPA's. This chart can be filed under the category of a picture paints 1,000 words. The Advisory Board, after beginning to address this topic in 2014, has found stakeholders on every side of the issue to join in the fight to correct this unjust regulation and bridge this unnecessary gap. There's a common sense solution to this debate, and the Advisory Board has always pushed for common sense solutions. In summary of this video, let's look at a few times the Advisory Board has put a line in the sand over common sense issues. These are the types of policy issues that arise from the political process and require an organization that will stand up and say enough is enough. First is the Elm Bank Reservation. In relation to work needed on the Framingham Sewer Extension, there was an effort to get the MWRA to pick up costs of restoring an old bridge on Cheney Lane and for the protection of an old elm tree shown here. The Advisory Board outright opposed these costs being picked up by the MWRA and saved ratepayer money from this obvious money grab. Another great example is the East Boston Steam Station, an old facility of the MDC. A proposal was floated and then pursued by the MWRA in which this derelict building would be rehabilitated under the premise of historical restoration at a high cost. The Advisory Board opposed any rehab of the building due to the obscene cost and the fact that the building would provide little or no use for the MWRA. The building was eventually given to the state, costing the ratepayers no money. A good comparison to the East Boston facility is the old Chestnut Hill Pump Station located near Boston College, which holds significant historical value as well as prime real estate value. The proposal was for the MWRA to pay exorbitant amounts of money to rehabilitate the building and create a waterworks museum. The Advisory Board opposed ratepayers paying for the project and recommended that private interest buy the building and support a museum through non-ratepayer money. The result is that the Waterworks Museum has preserved the history of the site while offering free tours to visitors and is financially supported by private financiers. Another win for ratepayers at the hands of the Advisory Board. Finally, as just the most recent example of common sense solutions by the Advisory Board, the Fish Hatchery Pipeline project was designed to deliver needed cold water for free to the McLaughlin Trout Hatchery, which is great for the state, except that Mass DEP also originally asked that the MWRA pick up the capital cost of building the connection to the hatchery. All the capital costs picked up by the ratepayers, all the benefits going to the hatchery and the state. After years of opposition by the Advisory Board, the issue was resolved in 2015 when the state agreed to pony up all of the connection costs, $3.2 million, so that ratepayers are not on the hook for any of it. These are the types of wins that get little fanfare, but they clearly illustrate the role that the Advisory Board plays, being the voice of the communities to say enough is enough, and over time saving millions and millions and millions of dollars for ratepayers. So that's 30 years in a nutshell. What do ratepayers have to show for all their investment in the water and wastewater systems? How about the greatest man-made water source in the world, producing the best tasting tap water in the country, as voted at the National AWWA Conference in 2014? The award is shown here with the then MWRA Board of Directors and is simply further evidence of why communities should look to join the MWRA's water system. Finally, ratepayers also now boast the cleanest urban beaches in America and a vibrant seaport district, which has become the hottest real estate market in the country thanks to the economic development that sprung from investments in water and wastewater infrastructure. It was certainly a difficult and expensive road with more work to come, but the results speak for themselves. For more information on the advisory board of MWRA Communities regarding the past 30 years or the next 30 years, please visit our website at www.mwraadvisoryboard.com.